She walked through her days with calm assurance. The woman who once lived in fear and silence now moved with freedom, confidence, and grace. Life was her own, and in that ownership, she found peace, joy, and purpose. She had rewritten her story completely and lived to inspire through example. Years had passed since she had taken the first step into a life of her own. She had grown strong, resilient, and confident. Each day brought new challenges and small victories. She faced life with calm observation and careful action. Her mornings began with quiet reflection. She walked in open spaces, felt the air on her face, and noticed the world around her. The freedom to move and think without fear filled her with gratitude. She often paused to appreciate simple things like the sound of birds, the sunlight on leaves, and the quiet streets. Work remained an important part of her life. It was no longer survival alone, but growth and skill building. She learned new techniques, improved old ones, and shared knowledge with others. Her dedication and reliability earned respect. She felt pride in being capable and independent. Connections with others deepened. Friends became trusted companions, people who had shared parts of her journey or who had simply observed her, quietly offered support and kindness. She learned the value of relationships based on respect and understanding. Each friendship strengthened her sense of belonging and reinforced her self-worth. She continued to write in her journal. It had become a companion through the years. She recorded observations, feelings, and reflections. Was a space where she could process experiences and celebrate achievements. Through writing, she stayed connected to herself and her journey. The community slowly began to see her differently. Whispers of judgment faded. People recognized her quiet strength and wisdom. She had become someone others could approach for guidance and support. Her example showed that courage and independence could be lived gracefully. Sometimes revisited the towns where she had spent time. Early in her journey, she observed the lives of others and reflected on the lessons. Learnage's journey reaffirmed her appreciation for her own choices. She had left fear behind and claimed her place in the world. Even as she traveled, she maintained routines that nurtured her body and mind. Walks, reading in quiet corners, and practicing skills she valued became daily habits. These routines grounded her and provided energy for new challenges. Her journal was a record of transformation. She reread passages from years past. The words reminded her of early struggles, loneliness, and fear. They highlighted her growth, resilience, and the strength of her decisions. Entry was a testament to endurance and self-belief. She took on new projects that brought satisfaction and purpose. Building skills, mentoring others, and creating opportunities for learning became important. Each accomplishment reinforced her confidence. Each challenge strengthened her independence. She learned to embrace solitude. Quiet moments were not empty but filled with reflection, creativity, and restoration. Solitude became a source of inner strength and peace. She learned to enjoy her own company and trust her own instincts. She helped organize gatherings and workshops for women and men alike. People shared stories, learned from experiences, and offered advice. She facilitated discussions with patience, empathy, and respect. Her presence was calming and her guidance gentle yet firm. Her story inspired others without her needing to speak loudly. People recognized the courage it took to live independently and with dignity. Her life became a quiet example that change and growth were possible. She faced moments of fear and doubt. Times when uncertainty pressed in, she responded with calm observation, careful planning, and deliberate action. Every challenge met was a reinforcement of self-trust and capability. Developed hobbies that brought joy and focus. Gardening, reading, writing, and travel nurtured creativity and peace. She celebrated small victories and enjoyed simple pleasures. Each activity contributed to her sense of fulfillment. Health and wellness were maintained with attention and correct exercise, good nutrition, and mindful living strengthened body and mind. Her physical presence reflected her inner resilience and freedom. Movement was a celebration of her life. An independent, she chose relationships with care. Friends and colleagues were selected for mutual respect and support. She valued honesty, empathy, and shared growth. Each connection enhanced her life and supported her journey. She reflected often on the path she had traveled. Days of fear, obedience, and isolation seemed distant, but important. They reminded her of the strength she had discovered and the choices she had made. Her past informed her present without defining either. Influence continued to grow quietly. People admired her calm strength and steady guidance. She inspired others to consider their own choices and possibilities. Her story encouraged reflection and courage. Without pressure or demand, she embraced change and uncertainty as natural parts of life. Every new experience was an opportunity to learn and grow her confidence in facing challenges. Strengthened with each step forward, she found joy in helping others navigate their own journeys. Offering advice, support, and empathy became a meaningful part of life. She understood the value of listening and encouraging without controlling. Her guidance was received with trust and gratitude. She continued to celebrate her independence and freedoms. Daily actions became affirmations of her courage and resilience. She relished the autonomy she had claimed and the life she had built. She walked through life with calm assurance and purpose. The woman who had once been silenced now moved freely with confidence and grace. Her presence alone was a testament to courage, determination, and self-respect. She understood that life is a continuous journey. Freedom, independence, and fulfillment require daily choices. Her past had shaped her but did not define her. Each day was an opportunity to live fully. Her story was now a quiet inspiration. She had survived fear, loneliness, and betrayal. She had chosen herself and her path, then in doing so, she had built a life of dignity, peace, and purpose. Her journey continued with awareness and intention. Lived fully in the present and planned thoughtfully for the future, her life was a demonstration of the power of choice, resilience, and human spirit through every challenge and triumph. She maintained gratitude for freedom, growth, independence, and the people who had supported her. Life was rich with experience and meaning. She understood that true strength comes from facing fear and making deliberate choices. Her life showed that even in the face of hardship and isolation, a person could reclaim control and live authentically. She moved forward each day with calm confidence and quiet joy. Her journey was ongoing and her spirit strong. She had rewritten her story and continued to live it fully and meaningfully. She woke in the early hours of the morning as she had done for many years. The air was crisp and filled with the quiet sounds of the world waking slowly. She took a deep breath and felt the freedom of space and time that belonged only to her. The memories of her past life came gently, but without the weight of fear. They reminded her of the strength she had discovered and the choices that had carried her to this moment. She began her day with a walk through streets she had grown to know and love. The sunlight touched the walls and the ground, and everything seemed alive. She noticed small details she had once overlooked: the shapes of leaves, the movement of birds, the patterns of light on the earth. Each observation reminded her of the beauty in the ordinary and the importance of being present in each moment. Work came next, but it was no longer merely a duty, which was a source of growth and connection. She took care to complete her tasks with thought and skill. Every project she undertook reflected her abilities and her dedication. She noticed how her careful attention inspired others to do the same during breaks. She engaged in quiet conversations with people she respected. These exchanges were gentle and meaningful. No one demanded anything from her, and she demanded nothing from anyone. It was a space of mutual understanding and shared humanity. The respect she felt and offered was reciprocal and nourishing. She kept her journal close. Had grown thick with years of careful writing. She opened it to a blank page and began to write about the small joys she had noticed that morning: the rustle of leaves, the laughter of a child nearby, the feeling of sunlight warming her skin. Writing had become more than a record. It was a meditation and a celebration of her life. She thought of her past with calm reflection. The days of fear and silence had been harsh, but instructive. She understood now that survival and obedience had taught lessons of patience, resilience, and the importance of careful observation. She also understood that enduring alone was not enough to truly live. She had to choose and claim her freedom. Her morning continued with planning and organizing. Small projects she had learned to value her time and attention each. Action was deliberate and intentional. She had discovered that life could be constructed thoughtfully and with purpose. She grew up in a place where life moved slowly and rules were older than most people living there from a young age. She learned to listen more than speak and to lower her eyes when elders talked. Her days were filled with simple tasks, helping at home, fetching water, folding clothes, and learning how to stay quiet. Everyone around her believed that a good woman did not ask questions and did not dream too loudly. She accepted this not because she agreed, but because there was no space to disagree. As she grew older, whispers about her future started to follow her through every room. Relatives spoke about her as if she was not there. They discussed age, family ties, and respect, never her feelings. She made her life being planned like a journey she would never be allowed to walk by choice. Each word felt heavy, but she kept her face calm. Her world silence was a skill learned. For survival, marriage was not spoken of as love or partnership. It was duty, stability, and sacrifice. She was told that happiness comes after obedience, that comfort grows with patience, that questions lead to regret. Watched other women accept the same path. Some smiled, some looked tired, but none spoke openly. She wondered if they once felt the same fear she now carried. One evening, the decision was made without her presence. A match had been found, an agreement reached. The man was older, respected, and considered suitable. No one asked if she was ready. No one asked if she felt safe. When she was informed it was presented as good news, her reaction was expected to be gratitude. Inside her chest, something tightened. Her future suddenly felt very small. She wanted to speak, to ask, to understand, but the room was full of firm faces. She knew any hesitation would be seen as disrespect, so she nodded softly. That nod changed everything. Days moved quickly after that. Plans were made, clothes were chosen, dates were fixed. She felt like a guest in her own life. People congratulated her and spoke of luck. She smiled, because that was what was required. Night she lay awake, staring into the dark. She imagined a different life, one where choice existed, but morning always came with reality. She met the man only a few times before the marriage. Their conversations were polite and distant. He spoke of responsibility and expectation. She listened and replied carefully. There was no warmth, only formality. She tried to convince herself that feelings could grow the turn. That maybe this was how all marriages began. The day of the marriage, she felt disconnected from her body, surrounded by people, noise, and movement. She followed instructions like a script she had memorized. Inside, she felt hollow. When it was over, she was told her old life was finished. She was now someone else. A wife. That night, as she sat alone, she understood the truth. She had stepped into a life she never chose. The weight of it pressed down on her quietly. She did not cry. Tears felt useless. Said she promised herself to endure, because endurance was the only power she had ever been taught. This was the beginning of a journey she never asked for, a path shaped by others, one that would test her silence, her strength, and her sense of self. Though she did not know it, yet this moment would lead to everything that followed. She entered her new home with quiet steps and a careful mind. The rooms were familiar, yet foreign. Everything smelled of someone else's habits and choices. She learned quickly what was expected, though. House was her stage, and she must perform well. Her husband spoke little, and when he did, it was usually about duties and rules. She listened and absorbed. She tried to show respect in every movement, every word, every gesture. Own desires were tucked away like a secret she dared not whisper. It's turned into weeks, and loneliness settled around her like dust. She cooked, she cleaned, she served. The house was full, but she felt invisible. She watched others move freely and envied the ease of their laughter. She remembered her childhood, freedom, and how small and heavy life had become. She tried to find small comforts, a corner where sunlight fell, a book borrowed, quietly moments of silence in the garden. But even these were fragile. Her house was full of eyes and judgments, and a single misstep could draw sharp words. Her husband expected obedience, not companionship. She tried to speak, sometimes a question about a meal, a request for advice, but his answers were brief. His eyes did not soften, and slowly She learned that her voice was unwelcome. The walls of the house seemed to echo her isolation. Walked silently from room to room. Her body moved, but her spirit felt still. Sometimes she imagined running away, but fear always stopped her. She had nowhere to go and no one to turn. Too often small mistakes were magnified. If a dish was not perfect, if a garment was misplaced, if her tone was too soft or too loud, the judgment fell on her alone. No one defended her. She learned to lower her head and accept the blame. To survive, she had to blend into the background outside. Out. The house life continued without. Her neighbors laughed, children played. She could see them through the windows, but never join them. She missed the freedom of walking without permission, of speaking without caution, of existing without apology, but that world belonged to others now. Letters came from her family. Occasionally they spoke of health celebrations and advice, but there was no mention of her feelings. No one asked if she was happy or safe. Her silence was assumed contentment. Tanned. She learned that speaking up might be worse than staying quiet. Her own reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar. She saw the tired eyes, the controlled expressions, woman shaped by expectations. Tried to remember who she was before the rules, but the memory felt faint, a shadow of a self that had no place in this house. Time passed slowly, and loneliness became her companion. Her days were measured by routine and endurance. Even small gestures of kindness from servants or neighbors felt like warmth. She clung to them in secret. They reminded her that a life of care could still exist. One night she cried quietly in the dark, not for escape, not for rebellion, but for the small self she feared was disappearing. She pressed her hands to her face and let the tears fall. They were silent, her only witness. The empty walls. For a moment, she felt her own truth, and it was fragile, but real. She began to keep a small journal hidden under her mattress. She wrote not to show anyone, but to remember to keep the self alive that the house and the rules tried to erase. Her words became a voice when her mouth could not speak. Secret garden of thought and feeling. Even in the smallest things she tried to hold on to dignity. She cooked carefully, she cleaned thoroughly, she listened and observed. She learned to read moods and avoid conflict. Her intelligence and attention became tools to survive. In that survival, she found a small kind of strength. Months passed and the house remained the same. She remained the same outwardly, but inside a quiet storm was growing. Her loneliness gave way to thought and planning. Her obedience gave way to self-observation. She began to understand that endurance was not enough. The life lived only to please others was a life half spent in it. So she waited and watched and learned it. World outside the walls continued, and she became an observer. Interaction, a lesson, every gesture, a clue. And though she still obeyed, she started to imagine what it would be like to choose this. Was the slow building of a life behind closed doors? Life of loneliness, of restraint, but also of quiet understanding. She did not yet know what would come next. Something deep inside was beginning to stir. It sensed that life could be more than the house, more than the rules, more than the silence. Her life continued quietly, but tension grew like a shadow in the house. The neighbors started noticing her isolation. Whispers began to form and spread like wind through dry grass. Small misunderstandings were turned into stories turned into judgments. She tried to ignore them. She focused on her duties and on the small joys she could still claim, but it was impossible to hide from the eyes of a community ready to judge her. Every action was watched. Her every word remembered. Even the smallest gesture could be twisted. One day, a small incident changed everything. A simple comment by a neighbor was overheard. It was innocent in her mind, but the rumor took a life of its own. Evening, the words had spread through the village. People who once smiled now stared with suspicion. Her husband confronted her with cold eyes. He had heard the story before he had heard her side. She tried to explain. Her voice shook and her heart raced, but he would not listen. The trust she had tried to build was gone. He said things she could not undo, things that made her feel like a stranger in her own home. Her family learned of the situation and chose sides quickly. No one asked for her version. No one offered comfort. Her relatives distanced themselves, protecting their own reputations. More than her truth, the woman who once followed rules blindly now realized rules could not protect her. She was asked to leave. The words were polite but firm. Her presence had become inconvenient. Her husband no longer wanted her. Her family no longer could defend her. She had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Alone in a small room, she felt fear like never before. The walls felt closer, the ceiling lower, the air felt heavy. She thought of running, but where could she go? Every door seemed closed, every street hostile. Isolation was complete and ruin the first. Nights of solitude, she cried, freely, not the controlled tears she had let fall in silence before these. Tears were for the loss of home, love, and belonging. They were for the self she feared was disappearing. She pressed her face into her hands and let grief wash over her. Days turned into weeks, and she had to find strength she did not know she'd possessed. Found temporary shelter with strangers who offered kindness without judgment. It was small and humble, but it was a place where she could breathe for. The first time she could eat when hungry and sleep without fear of sudden anger, she began to feel the first sparks of safety in weeks. She thought constantly about the past and what had led to this moment. She replayed memories of obedience and silence. She understood the cost of following rules blindly. She realized that no matter how careful she had been, she could not control the world. But in that reflection she found clarity. She could not undo what had happened. She could not reclaim the life she had lost, but she could decide what to do next. The choice was terrifying, but it was hers alone. She began to make small plans for independence, learning where she could find work, where she could stay safe. Each plan was careful and measured. She knew that any mistake could push her back into danger. She moved slowly but deliberately during this time. She met a few people who listened without judgment. They did not offer solutions, they simply listened. This simple act of being heard gave her courage. It reminded her that her thoughts mattered and her feelings were valid. She remembered the journal she had kept in the house now. She filled it with details of her new reality. Writing became more than a habit. It was a way to process fear, hope, and emerging strength. Her words became a map for the life she wanted to build. She understood that life had changed forever. She could not go back. The house was gone, the husband distant and untrusting, her family reluctant and distant. She had to find a new way to live. Despite fear and uncertainty, she felt a new emotion, possibility. The possibility of being herself, of making choices, of existing without fear. It was fragile like a bud in spring, but she held on to it carefully. Her body felt different, tooth attention in her muscles eased slightly, her eyes no longer lowered automatically. She practiced walking with her own rhythm. Every small movement was a tiny assertion of freedom. Even as she rebuilt herself, she felt the sting of being shunned. The community still whispered. Husband still avoided her. The family still judged. But she no longer felt invisible. She was seen by herself, and that mattered more than anything. In the quiet of the night, she imagined a life where her voice mattered, where she was safe and respected, where choices belonged to her. This vision was fragile, but growing. She would protect it. She would act on it. She would find a way to live fully, even if it meant leaving the past behind. This was the moment her journey changed. She was no longer simply surviving. She was preparing to live. Her life behind closed doors had ended. The life she would choose was beginning, and she felt the first taste of hope in years. Alone in the quiet room, she faced a choice. She had never imagined to return to a life of obedience and silence, or step into the unknown. The first option promised safety and familiarity, but at the cost of self. Second offered freedom and fear in equal measure. She felt her heart pull in both directions. For many nights she could not sleep. Her mind raced through memories and fears. She remembered the house, the loneliness, the rules. She remembered the small sparks of independence that had come with being alone. She remembered the people who'd listened without judgments. She realized that life had given her a rare gift, the chance to choose. Though the choice was terrifying, it was real and it belonged to her. She began to plan carefully. Every step had to be thought through. Could not risk being forced back into the old life. She started with small actions, learning about jobs she could do alone, finding places where she could stay safely, saving any coin she could earn. Every small step was a declaration. Every decision was a brick and a foundation for her new life. She met people who had also faced hard choices. They shared stories of struggle, courage, and hope. She listened and learned. They did not pity her, and they did not judge her past. They only offered guidance and kindness. Slowly she began to believe she could live differently. she practiced. Speaking her mind even in small matters, she tried to trust herself to make decisions. Success built confidence. The stake became a lesson she wrote in her journal every night, not just thoughts but plans and reflections. She imagined the life she wanted to build, a life of work, of friendships, of safety, of respect. She drew maps in her mind and on paper paths that led away from fear and toward possibilities. She faced fear, often fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of rejection, but she also felt a new feeling, growing courage. It was quiet and steady. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was there. Her body began to change too. She moved with more confidence. She looked people in the eye. She spoke with more firmness. Even her posture showed she was no longer the same woman who had entered a house of silence. One day she finally decided she would not return to the old life. She would leave for good. Decision brought relief and terror at the same time. She packed her few belongings with care. Every item carried memory and hope. She said goodbye to the temporary shelter, the people who had offered her kindness. She promised to remember them and their support. Their encouragement gave her strength. She stepped into the unknown with a mixture of fear and hope. The streets were crowded and noisy, but she felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in years, she walked without fear of being watched. She could breathe deeply without anticipation of anger or criticism. Every step was hers. Every step was hers. Breath was hers. She found a modest place to stay on. It was small and simple, but it was hers. No one judged her there. No one told her what to do or how to live. She began to feel the first true sense of independence. She sought work carefully, jobs that required skill and attention. She worked honestly and diligently. Every paycheck was a step toward building her life. Every effort proved she could exist and survive without control from others. The days were long and sometimes lonely, but loneliness was no longer fear. It was quiet time to reflect, and Grochet began to understand herself better. She discovered strength she had never known. She made small friendships, people who respected her past and encouraged her future. They offered conversation and support without expectations. She realized that connection could be gentle and safe, did not have to demand sacrifice of self. Even as she built her new life, she did not forget the old, the house, the husband, the family. The memories still stung, but she no longer felt powerless. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She understood that choice was her most powerful tool. Ability to choose her path gave her courage and hope. Every day she reaffirmed that she would not return. She would live her own life with dignity and freedom. Her journal became a record of transformation, every word a testimony of resilience and self-belief. She read it often to remind herself of how far she had come into the life she was determined to create. She faced moments of doubt, moments when fear whispered she would fail, but she remembered all the steps she had already taken. Every small success and act of courage reminded her that she was capable. She could survive, she could thrive, she could be free. This period of decision and action was the turning point. She chose herself and her future. She embraced the unknown. In doing so, she discovered the power that had always been within her, the power to decide the course of her life, the power to change everything. She lived each day with careful steps and growing confidence. Her new life was small and modest, but it was her own. She woke with the knowledge that she had choices and that each choice mattered. The smallest decisions were her own, and they carried a sense of pride. Work kept her busy and provided more than money. It gave purpose and a rhythm to her day. She learned new skills, met new people, and saw her abilities grow. Every task completed without fear or judgment strengthened her. Came slowly people who had seen her struggle or listened to her stories. They did not rush her or demand her past. They offered companionship and support. Simple conversations brought laughter and comfort. She began to understand that life could be shared without losing herself. She returned to her journal. Often it had become more than a habit. It was a witness to her journey. She wrote about small successes and struggles alike. She reflected on the past but focused on the future. Every word reminded her of how far she had come. The house she had left and the family she had lost were memories she carried carefully. Sometimes the memories hurt, and sometimes they were lessons. She forgave herself for past silence. She forgave others without expecting apologies. Her peace did not depend on their acknowledgement. She began to dream of larger goals, helping others who had been trapped by expectation or tradition. Sharing her story quietly and carefully, her experience became a tool for empathy and change. She understood the power of listening and of giving hope. The community that had once shunned her noticed her presence. At first, whispers and stares returned, but she no longer feared them. She walked with dignity and focused on her own life. Some people watched silently, some slowly showed respect. She realized that her freedom had already begun to influence others. She found spaces where she could be safe and still connected. Market, the small library, the streets where she once feared walking, these places became part of her life. She explored without fear and discovered joy in movement and choice. Every visit was a reminder that she could exist openly. Work became more than survival. It became a statement of independence. People saw her skill and reliability. Her confidence grew with recognitions. She began to trust her instincts and her decisions. The woman who had been silenced now spoke in action, in presence. She encountered moments of doubt and fear, times when loneliness pressed, hard times when she worried about the future, but she faced them with tools learned in her months of struggle. She breathed deeply, assessed options, and moved forward. Moment of choice reinforced her courage. She discovered pleasure in small achievements, a well-completed task, a kind word from a friend, a quiet evening with her thoughts. These moments built a mosaic of life that belonged entirely to her. She savored independence and safety as gifts she had earned. Over time, she began to share her story carefully with others, not to boast, but to offer hope. She spoke to women in similar situations. She listened to fears and offered advice. Her voice became a source of understanding and courage. She did not seek revenge. She did not dwell on the anger and betrayal of the past. She focused on building something new. Peace and purpose became her mission. Freedom and dignity guided her daily actions. Her health and body reflected her inner strength. She moved with confidence, looked people in the eye, and carried herself with pride. The woman who had once felt invisible now felt visible in her own life. She smiled often and laughed freely. Her energy was contagious to those around her. Months and years passed. Her life remained modest, but it was rich in experience and autonomy. She worked, she helped, she grew, and she learned. Every day brought new challenges and small victories. She faced them with courage and self-respect. Past never vanished, but it no longer defined her. She understood the lessons of obedience, loneliness, and fear. She transformed those lessons into wisdom and strength. Her memories became guides rather than chains. She found joy in helping others. Even small gestures of advice, encouragement, and understanding made a difference. She realized that her choice had not only saved herself but could help others. The power of choice became a gift she could share. Her story slowly became known in the community. People who once judged watched. Quietly, some offered subtle support. She never demanded recognition, but her actions spoke. Her dignity and independence made a quiet impression. She understood that life is not measured only by comfort or wealth, but by the courage to be oneself. Every day she woke with gratitude for the freedom she had claimed. Every night she reflected on her journey and felt pride in her resilience. She became a symbol of quiet strength, a woman who had faced fear, betrayal, and isolation, had chosen to live fully. She did not boast. She did not demand attention. Her life was her own testament to courage and choice. In the end, she discovered that one decision could change everything, that stepping into the unknown could bring freedom and self-respect, that even a life once defined by others could be rewritten by choice. She lived each day with the knowledge that she was the author of her own story, and in that knowledge she found peace, joy, and purpose. Years passed, and she continued to grow in strength and confidence. Her life had become a balance of work, reflection, and community. She found satisfaction in her independence and peace in her choices. Every day was lived fully and intentionally. She began to travel to nearby towns for work and learning. The world beyond her first shelter felt open and vast. She met people with different lives, stories, and Struggles each encounter expanded her understanding of resilience and human kindness. She shared her experiences quietly with women she met. They listened with trust and hope. Her story became a guide, not a warning. It showed that fear could be faced and freedom could be claimed. She developed routines that nurtured both body and mind. Morning walks in the open air, reading in quiet corners, and working on skills she wanted to master. She realized that caring for herself was not selfish but essential. Her journal had grown thick with years of writing. She reread passages from her early days of fear and loneliness. The words reminded her how far she had come. Writing became a testament to endurance, courage, and self-belief. She found satisfaction in her work and created small projects for herself. She built connections with people who respected her independence. Some were neighbors, some were colleagues, and some were travelers who admired her dedication. Time gave her clarity and patience. She understood that her past would always be part of her, but it would not control her. The woman she had been and the woman she had become coexisted. The past provided lessons, the present offered choice, and the future held promise. She occasionally returned to her family. The meetings were cautious and quiet. Some bridges were mended slowly and carefully. She maintained her independence while showing understanding and forgiveness. Her reputation in the community shifted over time. People noticed her strength, calmness, and wisdom. Whispers of judgment faded into respect. She became a person people approached for advice and support. Her presence itself became an example of courage and dignity. She continued to take risks, new projects, new responsibilities, and learning opportunities. Each risk was measured but meaningful. She understood that growth required movement beyond comfort. Moments of solitude were cherished. She used them for reflection, creativity, and rest. These times strengthened her inner world and gave her energy for outward life. She began to help organize gatherings and small workshops. Women and men alike came to share stories, experiences, and advice. She facilitated conversations with patience and empathy. Her voice carried authority without demand and guidance without control. Her work slowly inspired others. People who had once been trapped by expectations saw possibilities in her choices. Her story became a quiet movement of encouragement. She showed that lives could be rewritten through determination and courage. She continued to face fear and uncertainty at times. Change and independence require constant courage, but she had learned to face it with calm observation and thoughtful action. A challenge reinforced her trust in herself. She developed hobbies that brought joy and focus: gardening, reading, writing, and occasional travel. These activities nurtured her creativity and sense of peace. She learned to celebrate small victories and simple pleasures. Her health improved with attention and care. She exercised regularly and ate consciously. Her body reflected her inner resilience, and calm movement became a celebration of freedom. She invested in relationships that were reciprocal and nurturing. Friendships strengthened and new bonds formed. Each connection was based on mutual respect and understanding. She learned the value of choosing companions as carefully as choosing work or actions. She looked back on her journey often. The days of forced silence and fear seemed distant, but important. They reminded her of strength she had discovered, of choices she had made, and of courage. She had claimed her influence spread quietly. People admired the balance she had achieved. Her story inspired others to consider their own choices and the paths they could take. Never demanded attention, but her life spoke for itself. She learned that freedom is a process, not a single event, is cultivated through patience, perseverance, and daily decision. She understood that independence is maintained through vigilance, compassion, and wisdom. She took time to mentor young women. She taught them to trust themselves and to recognize strength within her. Guidance was gentle and firm. She encouraged them to take steps toward their own lives with courage. She developed a sense of fulfillment that was deep and steady. It was not based on wealth or status, but on autonomy, growth, and kindness. Her life became a blend of work support, reflection, and creativity. Day was a deliberate choice toward her own happiness and self-respect. She realized that one choice had changed everything. Stepping away from a life defined by others had opened doors she could never have imagined. She had faced fear, rejection, and uncertainty, and uncertainty and had built a life of dignity, freedom, and purpose. The quiet of the evening she often sat with her journal reflecting. She wrote about the journey, the lessons learned, and the growth achieved. The writing became a ritual of gratitude and affirmation. Her story became a quiet testament to courage and resilience. She had survived fear, loneliness, and betrayal, and she had claimed a life that belonged to her. Choices had shaped not just survival, but a meaningful existence. She understood that the journey never truly ends. Life continues to offer challenges and opportunities, but with courage, self-belief, and careful choice, each day can be lived fully. She met a woman at the market who had heard parts of her story, spoke quietly about challenges, and hoped the conversation was careful and slow. Reminded her of the importance of listening and empathy through exchange. She realized that even small connections could offer profound understanding. After returning home, she tended to her garden. The act of planting and caring for life became a metaphor for her own journey. Each seed sown with care grew slowly and steadily. She learned that patience and consistency were as important in gardening as they were in living or work in the community. Had expanded, she facilitated small gatherings where people shared their experiences and learned from each other. She encouraged discussion without imposing her own views. Her role was subtle but meaningful. People respected her because she had lived through difficulty and emerged with wisdom and calm. Meals were simple but nourishing. She prepared them with attention, and reading became a ritual of mindfulness and respect for her own body. She had learned that caring for herself was not selfish, but essential to sustaining her energy and well-being. Afternoons often included reading and reflection. Books provided new ideas and perspectives. They reminded her that the world was larger than her own experiences. Reflection allowed her to integrate these ideas into her own life and action. She sometimes walked to a quiet place near water. The flowing river reminded her of change and continuity. She thought of the people she had helped and those who had helped her. Life was a series of exchanges and shared moments. Understanding kindness could ripple outward in ways that were not always visible. Evenings were spent in gentle work or contemplation. She sometimes wrote letters to friends who had been important in her journey. She sent words of gratitude and encouragement. Each letter strengthened bonds and offered subtle support. Sleep came as she had trained herself over the years. She rested deeply, and without fear. Her body and mind had learned the rhythm of her chosen life. Even dreams were calm and reflective of the hope and freedom she now carried. She often thought of women and men who were still trapped in lives dictated by others. Her story had become a guide for some, but she wished it could reach more. She considered small projects and teaching moments that could inspire and empower. She wanted to show that even difficult beginnings could be transformed into lives of dignity and choice. Her influence grew quietly, but steadily. People noticed the calm confidence and quiet courage in her presence. They approached her for advice and encouragement. She offered guidance gently, without pressure. Her words were measured and filled with empathy. She understood that living fully required balance: work, reflection, community, and solitude. Each had their place. Neglecting any aspect led to weakness or imbalance. She carefully maintained this balance and noticed its effect on her well-being. She experienced moments of fear or doubt. Occasionally, new challenges and uncertainties always brought a flicker of hesitation, but she met them with reflection and deliberate action. A deliberate action. Success reinforced her trust in herself and her decisions. She spent time mentoring young women. They came with curiosity and anxiety. She taught them to trust themselves, to recognize their strength, and to make deliberate choices. Her guidance was based on lived experience and deep empathy. The seasons passed and she adapted to each change. Winter brought reflection and slower rhythms. Spring brought growth and renewal. Summer brought energy and outward activity. Autumn brought harvest and contemplation. Each season mirrored her own cycles of thought and growth. She celebrated small achievements, quietly completing a difficult task, learning a new skill, helping another person. Victory was recorded in her journal and celebrated privately. They reminded her that life was built of many small steps rather than single dramatic events. She continued to expand her knowledge, new skills, and understanding brought confidence and new opportunities, she realized that learning was lifelong and that growth was ongoing travel. Offered perspective, she visited distant places to learn how others lived and worked. She saw new possibilities and returned with ideas for her own. Life in Community's journey was deliberate and chosen. Her journal reflected this growth. She wrote about lessons learned, failures met successes, celebrated, and hopes for the future. The pages were filled with practical wisdom and emotional insight. Her health remained strong through attention and care. Physical activity, reading, good nutrition, and mindful living kept her body and mind aligned. She had discovered that strength was both inner and outer. She formed friendships that were reciprocal and supportive. Its bond was chosen and maintained with care. Trust and mutual respect became the foundation of these relationships. Our influence extended to her family. Though cautiously, some bridges were rebuilt over years. She maintained independence while engaging in connection, understanding, and empathy guided her actions rather than expectation or obligation. She understood the power of choice and action. Every day was an opportunity to reinforce independence and dignity. Her past informed her present without limiting it. Community recognition grew quietly. People admired her life and approach without needing to be told why. Her calm assurance inspired trust and curiosity. They saw a person who had faced difficulty and emerged strong and thoughtful. She continued to balance solitude and community time alone for reflection, learning, and creativity, time with others for shared work and exchange. Both were essential to her sense of self and purpose. The lessons of her past were not forgotten. Obedience, isolation, fear, and betrayal taught resilience, patience, and the importance of deliberate action. She honored those lessons without allowing them to dictate her life. She faced moments of uncertainty with the tools she had built. Patience, careful observation, and deliberate action allowed her to navigate challenges. Each step reinforced her confidence and capacities. Hatch cultivated creativity and hobbies that brought joy and focus. Gardening, reading, writing, travel, and learning new skills enriched her life. These activities nurtured her mind, body, and spirit. Continued to mentor and guide quietly. Her stories and advice offered hope and direction to those who needed. Either life became an example that choice and courage could transform a life. She 8. Celebrated her freedom and independence. Daily, every action, deliberate, every decision meaningful. It claimed control over her life and exercised it carefully. Her life was full yet balanced. Growth, reflection, work, community, and solitude each had its place. She understood that living fully was a continuous practice. Quiet confidence she carried was visible to those around her. She inspired trust and admiration not by words alone but by consistent actions. Her life spoke of resilience, dignity, and thoughtful choice. She understood that the journey of life is ongoing. Challenges will arise, opportunities will appear, and choices must continue. She faced each day with awareness, confidence, and calm. She reflected on her journey often, though days of fear and silence seemed distant, but important. They reminded her of strength, courage, and the power of deliberate choice. Her life was a testament to resilience, freedom, and careful actions. She had faced isolation, betrayal, and fear. She had chosen herself and her path, and in doing so, she had built a life of dignity and purpose. She moved forward with calm assurance and quiet joy. Her choices had shaped a life that belonged entirely to her. Her story continued to inspire and guide those who crossed her path. She lived fully and intentionally.